Have you ever thought about a social system so powerful that it decides your entire life's path the second you're born? Well, today we're going to dive into one of the oldest, most complex social hierarchies ever created, the caste system.
I am I'm just so glad you could join us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Pull up a chair, get comfortable, because today we are looking at a stack of notes that is, well, it's incredibly intense,
It really is.
deeply passionate, and frankly a masterclass in understanding how human beings organize themselves and, how they control one another.
Mm.
We are looking at the Indian caste system. Now, you might see this referred to in our source text as Sanadhanam.
Right.
The notes we have today are not just a dry historical timeline. They are a highly critical, really blistering breakdown of the history, the mechanics, and the sheer human cost of this social hierarchy.
Yeah, along with a really inspiring look at the historical movements that fought back against it.
Exactly.
But before we get into the mechanics of this system, I want to set a clear, calm framework for our conversation.
That's a good idea.
The text we are working from contains some highly politically and religiously charged language. Right out of the gate, the author calls the caste system one of the worst social structures created by the most dreadful humans to control other human beings.
It doesn't pull any punches.
It does not. So I want to be explicit with you, the listener, right now. As your guides today, we are not taking sides.
Yo.
We are not endorsing the specific religious critiques or the political viewpoints expressed by the author of these notes. Our mission is simply to impartially report on what is in the source material, to unpack the historical framework it describes, and to help you understand exactly why the source argues this system was so deeply and uniquely oppressive.
We are just the messengers here to help you navigate this fascinating and frankly heavy material.
Exactly.
And just to clarify before we jump in, when the author uses that term Sanadhanam, what exactly are they referring to?
It is a crucial term to define right away. Generally, Sanadhana Dharma is a term many Hindus use to describe their eternal duties or orthodox religion. However, in the context of these specific, highly critical notes, the author uses the term Sanadhanam to represent the ideological, religious, and textual foundation that birthed and justified the caste system.
Ah, I see.
They're using it to describe the root code of the hierarchy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the blueprint. Looking at these notes, how did this massive social architecture actually begin?
According to the ancient texts referenced in our sources, society was originally categorized into a fourfold system called the Varna system.
Varna, got it.
At the very top, you had the Brahmins, who were designated as the priests, scholars, and teachers.
Okay.
Below them were the Kshatriyas, the warriors and the rulers. Then the Vaishyas, who were the agriculturalists, traders, and merchants.
And the fourth?
The fourth were the Shudras, whose designated role was to be laborers and service providers for the other three Varnas.
So that covers the four main tiers. But reading further down in the text, it seems like there is a massive group of people who aren't even on that list.
Yeah, and that is one of the most severe aspects of the structure. There were entire communities placed completely outside of this four-tier system.
Just excluded entirely.
They were deemed so low that they weren't even included in the Varna framework. Historically, they were labeled as untouchables.
Wow.
Today, that group is widely known as Dalits, a term that translates roughly to broken or scattered, which they adopted as a term of empowerment and political identity later on.
So how did we get from a system of occupational categories to a rigid lockdown? Because the notes mention that maybe in the very, very ancient days, this was just about what job you did.
What's fascinating here is the evolution of that structure. Our sources point out that some scholars argue this Varna system might have started out as a more fluid occupational classification.
Like you do this job, so you're in this group.
Exactly. But over centuries, something shifted. It hardened. It transformed from an occupational grouping into what is called jati.
Jockey.
Yes, a hereditary birth-based system. And that is the pivotal moment where social mobility essentially evaporated.
The rigidity of that shift is the real aha moment for understanding how this worked. To make it relatable for you listening, imagine you are looking at a giant corporate ladder.
Right.
In a normal class system, if you work incredibly hard, get an education, or invent something amazing, you can climb from the mailroom to the executive suite. Wealth and education can change your status.
Typically, yes.
But wait, if you were born a Shudra in this Jati system and you were incredibly smart and acquired wealth, was there really absolutely no loophole to move up?
According to the text, no. Your talent didn't matter. Your wealth didn't matter.
That is wild.
Your caste was determined by birth, fixed for life, and automatically passed down to your children. You inherit all the restrictions of your floor the second you take your first breath. It is a profound structural lock.
Which brings us to a huge question. How did a system like that survive for centuries? You would think people would just overthrow it immediately.
You would think so.
But the notes outline this interlocking web of controls that is, honestly, kind of terrifying in its efficiency.
The author argues that the caste system wasn't just built on a single pillar of discrimination. It was an entire ecosystem of oppression. Let's look at the first layer the text identifies, which is a religious justification.
Right, tying it to the divine.
Exactly. The hierarchy was often justified through religious interpretations, specifically ideas of purity and pollution, and concepts of karma and rebirth.
Meaning the idea that being born into a lower caste was viewed as a cosmic punishment for your past actions in a previous life.
Precisely. And when inequality is framed as spiritually justified, it becomes incredibly difficult to fight.
Because you're not just fighting the rules.
No, it gives the system a kind of undeniable moral legitimacy within those communities. You aren't just fighting the local landowner, you're essentially being told you're fighting the universe's divine ledger.
That is a wild psychological trap. It is like being put in solitary confinement today because of a crime someone claims you committed in a dream.
That's a harsh way to put it, but yes.
How do you even begin to defend yourself against that?
It is a profound psychological burden. And once that moral justification is entrenched, the physical and economic chokeholds come next.
Right, the practical barriers.
The text points to education as the primary weapon. The equation here is simple. Education equals power. Therefore, the denial of education equals structural control.
Keep them from learning.
For centuries, formal education, especially the learning of sacred languages like Sanskrit, was heavily restricted strictly to the upper castes.
It is just staggering to think about the sheer scale of human potential that was crushed just because of the family someone was born into.
It really is.
If you block an entire demographic from learning to read, write, or study the laws of the land, upward mobility isn't just difficult, it is structurally impossible.
And you combine that educational blackout with the economic reality. Because your occupation was hereditary, you couldn't just switch careers.
You were stuck.
Lower castes were bound to menial labor. They were paid extremely low wages, often entirely dependent on upper caste landowners for their survival.
So they couldn't even build independent wealth.
No. This created a permanent, inescapable cycle of poverty that was permanently tied to their social identity.
But surely people tried to break those rules, right? I mean, human nature dictates that someone is going to try and read a book they aren't supposed to, or marry someone from a different floor of that corporate ladder. What happens then?
The text is unflinching about this. The hierarchy wasn't just maintained by polite social pressure or economic threats. It was enforced violently.
Violently.
The notes detail severe punishments for transgressing caste norms, particularly regarding intercaste marriages. This led to honor killings, where the author notes thousands of young people were murdered simply for falling in love across caste lines.
The source text gets very pointed here. It claims that upper castes ferociously fought any attempt by lower castes, Shudras or Dalits, to elevate themselves even one level higher.
Yes, it is a very strong critique.
And it specifically calls out the Brahmins. The author argues that they sat at the top of the food chain, insulated from direct physical violence, while acting as the ultimate enablers.
That is the core of their argument.
The claim is that because Brahmins positioned themselves as self-proclaimed agents of God, the middlemen distributing God's blessings, they could preach strict adherence to the system that enabled this violence without getting their own hands dirty.
It is a stark indictment by the author. The text also outlines how the system mandated strict physical social segregation.
Keeping people physically apart.
Exactly. Certain communities, especially Dalits, faced prohibitions from entering temples. They were denied access to public drinking wells, forced into segregated housing outside the main village, and pushed into what the system deemed polluting occupations, like manual scavenging or leatherwork.
Just completely marginalized.
As the text summarizes, this wasn't just a matter of social preference. It was systematic physical exclusion from public life.
And then just when you think you have a handle on how the system sustained itself from the inside, a massive external force arrives, the British Empire.
Yes.
Going through these notes, I expected the arrival of a foreign colonial power to completely disrupt this local social hierarchy, but that is not what happened at all.
No, it wasn't. It is a fascinating and tragic historical twist. During British colonial rule, instead of dissolving these boundaries, The British administration actually codified them.
They made it official.
They formalized caste identities by writing them into official censuses starting in the late 19th century.
That feels like a modern social media algorithm that decides you like a certain type of video and then aggressively locks you into an echo chamber where you can never see anything else.
That is an excellent way to look at it.
Once you are categorized on official government paper, you can't escape it.
It is a classic example of how bureaucratic documentation can freeze an evolving social dynamic into stone. For the British, it was largely about administrative convenience and perhaps a strategy of divide and rule.
The population categorized.
Right. But by recording these castes officially and tying government jobs and military recruitment to these specific categories, the British imperial administration gave the caste system a new, modern administrative set of teeth.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you cannot have a system of oppression this vast without a massive centuries-long resistance. Human beings do not just accept this kind of suppression quietly.
Never.
And the notes provide this incredible lineage of thinkers, saints, and leaders who pushed back.
It is a long and vibrant history of reform that is often overlooked. Let's walk through the timeline and the text highlights.
Let's do it.
Going all the way back to the 6th century BCE, we have Gautama Buddha. He explicitly rejected this birth-based hierarchy, teaching that a person's worth depends entirely on their karma, their daily actions and choices, not the family they were born into.
A radical thought at the time.
Extremely radical. He opened his community, the Buddha Sangha, to everyone, regardless of caste. Around the same time, you have Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, who emphasized the equality of all souls.
But how do you fight a system that dictates every physical aspect of your life, like who you can eat with? The notes mention Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, and he didn't just preach against caste, he instituted a physical practice to break it.
He did. He introduced the langar, which is the community kitchen.
And reading about the langar in these notes, it seems like such a beautifully disruptive idea.
It was brilliant.
In a society completely obsessed with purity and pollution, where who you eat with and who cooks your food is strictly regulated, forcing everyone to sit shoulder to shoulder on the floor and eat the exact same meal together was a radical revolutionary act, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It forced people to physically break the rules of segregation in order to participate in the spiritual community. We also see mentions of medieval figures like Ravidas, who preached spiritual equality from a marginalized caste himself, and Basavana, who promoted equality through the Lingaya movement in the 12th century, actively encouraging intercaste marriages.
Jumping forward to the 20th century, the notes bring up giants of modern history. Mahatma Gandhi is mentioned for his fierce opposition to untouchability, but the text really centers on another monumental figure, B.R. Ambedkar.
Yes.
Tell us about him, because his story seems almost impossible given the rules of the system we just discussed.
Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's life is one of the most remarkable arcs in modern history. He was born into a Mahar family, which was considered an untouchable caste.
So the very bottom.
Outside the bottom, really. As a child, he wasn't allowed to sit inside the classroom with the other students. He had to sit outside on a gunny sack he brought from home so he wouldn't pollute the school's floor.
To go from sitting outside the classroom to becoming the principal architect of the Indian Constitution is just mind-blowing.
It is a testament to his sheer brilliance and willpower. He managed to secure scholarships, earning doctorates from Columbia University and the London School of Economics.
Incredible.
He returned to India and didn't just fight for reform within the system. He advocated for the complete annihilation of caste. He believed the system was fundamentally incompatible with democracy and human dignity.
He wanted to tear it out by the roots.
Exactly. Eventually, believing that equality could not be achieved within the orthodox Hindu framework, he converted to Buddhism in 1956, and millions of his followers did the same.
The notes also credit other regional powerhouses, like Jyotirao Phule in Maharashtra, who opened the first schools for lower caste girls, and Sri Narayana Guru in Kerala, who pushed the message of one caste, one religion, one God for mankind.
Right. There were movements everywhere.
But there's a massive section of this research entirely dedicated to one specific region in the south, the state of Tamil Nadu. What exactly happened there that warrants so much attention in the source text?
The author gives special prominence to Tamil Nadu because it is seen as one of the most coordinated political and successful attacks on the caste system. They call it the social justice movement.
So it wasn't just theoretical.
No, this wasn't just a few philosophers writing essays. This was a mass movement that fundamentally changed the political landscape of the region in the 20th century.
And it seems to center heavily on a leader named Periyar. What was his approach?
Periyar, or E.V. Ramasamy, led what was called the self-respect movement. According to the text, his approach was fiercely rationalist. He strongly attacked the caste hierarchy and specifically targeted Brahmin dominance in public life.
So he went right at the top.
Directly. The source notes that Periyar didn't just ask for better treatment. He sought to expose the foolishness of religious superstitions that justified the hierarchy in the first place. He believed that until the religious reverence for the system was destroyed, the social structure would remain.
That is a very direct, aggressive attack on the root code we talked about earlier. But the notes mention that another leader, Erignar Anna, took Periyar's social rebellion and weaponized it politically. How did he pull that off?
Erignar Anna was a brilliant orator and organizer. The text explains that Anna believed caste was entirely man-made, a tool used to actively weaken Tamil society.
A divisive tool.
Yes. His biggest contribution, according to the notes, is that he moved these anti-caste ideas out of social reform circles and built a massive political party around them. He took the fight straight into electoral politics and government action.
Which paved the way for the third figure mentioned, Kalangar, also known as M. Karunanidhi. It looks like he was the one who actually codified these ideas into state law.
Yes. As a hugely influential chief minister in post-independence Tamil Nadu, the text notes he protected and vastly expanded affirmative action. In India, this is known as the reservation system.
The notes use a couple of terms here, scheduled castes and backward classes. For someone listening outside of India, what exactly do those administrative terms mean?
Great question. Scheduled castes is the official constitutional designation used by the Indian government for Dalits, the historically untouchable communities we discussed earlier.
Okay, got it.
Backward classes, or other backward classes, refers to a massive grouping of other castes that, while traditionally above Dalits in the hierarchy, still faced severe historical, educational, and economic disadvantages.
So trying to level the playing field for multiple groups.
Precisely. Kalagner expanded reservations in government jobs and education for these groups, created specific welfare schemes, and championed the idea that dignity and self-respect must override any birth-based status.
It is incredible to trace that evolution. From a spiritual rebellion with the Buddha sitting under a tree, to a community kitchen with Guru Nanak, all the way to constitutional law and modern state welfare schemes. Which brings us right up to the present day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at post-independence India. The notes explain that, legally speaking, the landscape has entirely changed.
Thanks to the Constitution.
Right. Thanks to leaders like Ambedkar, the Indian Constitution officially and explicitly abolished untouchability. Affirmative action policies were introduced at a massive scale. Discrimination based on caste was made entirely illegal.
But I'm reading the conclusion of these notes, and there is a very sobering reality check. You can change a law overnight, but social attitudes change at a glacial pace.
Precisely. The author provides a very important nuance here at the end. They note that not all communities practice caste with equal rigidity today.
It varies.
It does. Urbanization has naturally scrambled a lot of these rules. It's hard to maintain strict segregation on a crowded subway in Mumbai. Access to education has genuinely reduced some barriers. And it's important to note that many reformers from within Hinduism and broader Indian society have fought tirelessly alongside marginalized groups against this discrimination.
But the shadow is still there.
It is. The text makes it abundantly clear that despite the progressive laws, caste-based discrimination still exists, particularly in rural areas. When you combine birth-based hierarchy, religious justification, and economic control for over 2 millennia, it leaves a very deep scar.
It doesn't just wash away.
No. Deep economic and educational gaps persist today because you cannot erase centuries of accumulated wealth and disparity with the stroke of a legislative pen.
So what does this all mean? Why does this matter to you listening to us right now, whether you are in New York, Nairobi, or London? Because understanding the mechanics of the caste system isn't just about learning Indian history.
No, not at all.
It is a masterclass in understanding how power structures sustain themselves anywhere in the world. It shows us how economics, religion, education, and seemingly harmless social rules can be woven tightly together to permanently lock people into specific roles.
That's the real takeaway.
It is the ultimate historical example of how inequality isn't just an accident of nature. It is often a carefully constructed, deliberately maintained system designed to protect those at the very top.
It absolutely is. And examining a system this extreme forces us to look inward at our own environments. I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over after you finish listening today.
We do.
Well, the Indian caste system is a unique, culturally specific, and highly explicit historical structure. What are the invisible structures in your own society today? What are the unspoken rules in your industry, your city, or your social circles that might be quietly dictating people's opportunities based entirely on where they started, rather than what they are actually capable of doing?
That is a phenomenal question to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We covered a lot of heavy, complex ground, but having you along for the journey makes it all worth it. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep an open mind, and keep learning. We will see you next time.